Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to my new video and my new channel as well. Thank you for joining. Those of you who have subscribed, really appreciate that from you guys. You guys are the best, and I know I can count on you, so really appreciate it. And if you haven't subscribed already, make sure you subscribe and try and watch the video from start to end. That's really is what helps the algorithm. YouTube uses that 90% of the time. And other things is like checks the comments and likes and stuff like that. But watching the video start to end is 90% of the algorithm in YouTube. And this is why I've started the new channel, because I wanted to start fresh with this algorithm and really push the channel out there. We are getting there, guys. We are doing really well. So in today's episode, I'm going to talk about China and the island of Taiwan. Did Trump sell out Taiwan? Let's discuss it. So before I start, the picture you see in front of us is President Xi showing Trump a tree that's been older than 300 years. So Trump initially didn't understand why President Xi was showing him an old tree. And I remember watching some of the clips as well, and Trump was asking President Xi, am I the first president to come here? Because he was giving him a tour of the Imperial Gardens. And Trump wanted to feel special. He said, am I the first, president that you are bringing me here? And things like that. And and obviously, like, he wanted to feel special and he wanted to be the first. That's what Trump is like. He's got a massive ego. And President Xi showed him the tree that's been older than 300 years, and I don't think President Trump understood the meaning behind it. So the true meaning behind it, President Xi is trying to say that this tree is older than the United States. That's what he was really trying to say. But obviously, in a more nicer, polite way of saying it, because China is a civilization that's been around for 4,000, 5,000 years. It's one of the oldest civilizations on Earth. And United States has only been around for less than 300 years. So this is the message that President Xi was trying to tell Trump, but I don't think Trump understood the message. And only thing Trump wanted to know is whether he's the first president that was taking a tour of the Imperial Gardens and whether he's special. That's the only thing that Trump was worried about. But I think when Trump went home, he read the media, he spoke to some people, and then he realized what President Xi meant. But by then it was too late. So before I go into Taiwan, I wanted to also talk about Jimmy Lai. So Jimmy Lai, the situation with Jimmy Lai, it actually did get brought up during the meeting between United States and China, and it was brought up in Beijing. And it was President Trump who actually brought it up. However, once President Trump realized the truth, he immediately, stopped talking about it. He immediately changed subjects because, obviously I wasn't in the room, but this is just this is somebody who was in the room that actually mentioned, and I believe this is actual fact. When President Trump was given the facts of Jimmy Lai, how he was colluding with foreign powers, he was actually also colluding with what's his name, um, John Bolton, and he was also colluding with Paul Wolfowitz, and most importantly, he was colluding with Mike Pompeo. And Mike Pompeo was Trump's Secretary of State at the time. So as soon as China, spoke about these facts, in front of Trump and his administration in Beijing, Trump immediately changed subjects and he immediately shut this conversation down because what China was trying to say, this was all down to Trump. It was all down to his administration. He was the president at the time, and Mike Pompeo was his Secretary of State. So what China was trying to say is all of these problems Jimmy Lau has been causing in Hong Kong is basically your fault, and it's your administration's fault. And immediately President Trump was like, "Oh, okay, let's change the subject. Let's change. So let's move on." So immediately they had to shut this conversation down, and rightly so because Jimmy Lai. There's tons of evidence he was colluding with CIA, Mike Pompeo, Wolfowitz, Bolton, and I believe President Trump even knew about it as well. But the difference is back then President Trump had no respect for China at the time because he was the language that was coming out of President Trump about China at the time was atrocious, guys. I don't know if you've seen some of the old clips, but he was saying that things like China is raping our country. He was using the word rape. I don't mean grape the fruit, by the way, guys. I can't say the actual word because of YouTube, but you can kind of work it out what I mean. He said China was graping America. He was saying all these things, bad, horrible things about China. He was making China the enemy at the time. So I'm sure Trump knew what he was doing. He was basically, you know, sending out seeds to destroy China, and one of his seeds was Jimmy Lai. So as soon as China presented the facts, Trump immediately shut it down and wanted to change the subject. All right, let's talk about something else. So again, it was a really, really bad mistake to even bring it up in the first place. So let's talk about the good things that Trump has done, actually. Trump, for the first president ever, has said that Taiwan is actually might not be defendable, and he's speaking actual facts here. And I think Trump, for the first time in his life, he's using his common sense. He says that Taiwan is less than 59 miles away from mainland, and it's 9,500 miles away from United States, and it's a little bit far from us, and it's a difficult problem, especially when it comes to defense. And then he mentions, if you look at the history, Taiwan was developed when we had presidents that didn't know what the hell they were doing. They stole our chip industry. So what he's trying to say is the only reason that America wants to defend Taiwan, when I say Taiwan, I mean the island of Taiwan, but you know what I mean, guys. Obviously it's still part of China, but I just say Taiwan for short, but I know they are still part of China. I'm not talking they're separate or anything like that. So when he says they stole our chip industry, he's saying that America allowed Taiwan to build its own chip industry and become dependent on America defending them. Because the only reason America wants to defend them is not because they have, diversity or democracy, or they have full of, you know, people in there who love Starbucks or McDonald's, or they love American way of life. The only reason alone they want to defend the island of Taiwan is because they want to preserve their semiconductors, and they don't want those semiconductors to go to the mainland hands. And that's the only reason they want to defend the island. And there are other reasons as well. Obviously, the island is a central part of United States containment policy of China. It's what you call the first island chain. And the first island chain involves the island of Taiwan and Japan, South Korea, Philippines. Then you got the second island chain, which includes Guam and places like that. So it's all part of the containment policy against China. And and this is why United States do not want China and Taiwan to be reunified. Because if you look at American policy around the world, guys, they keep countries separate because it makes them money. So they keep North and South Korea separate because South Korea pays them a lot of money. They buy American weapons. They keep the military industrial complex going. So they make the North Koreans look like the bad guys. They scare the South Koreans, and the South Koreans are forced to buy American weapons, keep American soldiers in their country because they make them scared of the North Koreans. They did that with South Vietnam and North Vietnam. Obviously, that didn't work out too well for them. And they're doing it in all parts of the world, guys. That's what they do. And they're doing it in Europe with Ukraine and Russia. So this is how they keep the military industrial complex going. They make sure they have a boogeyman and they force countries to basically buy weapons, pay America for protection. It's just a protection racket, basically, a scam. So that's what they do with the island. They make everyone in the island believe China is the enemy, China is the boogeyman. We are your friends, we are the West. You need to stick with us. Everybody knows when the push comes to the shove, America will be nowhere to be seen because it's impossible for America to defend the island. Um, if China ever wanted to reunify militarily, which I don't think they will, by the way, I think it's going to be a peaceful reunification. But if they did wanted to, you know, reunify with the island, they can do it today, tomorrow, easily. Easily, guys. America wouldn't be able to do anything. Not one thing. Especially now, after what's happening with Iran, there is no way that Trump is going to do it. I mean, look at the language he's using. He's the first president who's saying that, Taiwan is just too far away from us to defend. That's what he's trying to say in his own words. He's saying he's only 59 miles from China, but it's 9,500 miles from United States. How are they going to defend that? If they use any military bases from Philippines, Japan, or South Korea, those bases are going to be destroyed, just like Iranians have destroyed American bases around them. Except the Chinese response is going to be much, much harsher, guys. Because they've got a lot more missiles, they've got a lot more drones. There won't be a single building standing in an American base. Everything will be gone. And I think Trump knows that. And President Xi gave him a very, very stern warning in Beijing. He told him you have to be very careful with how you deal with the question of Taiwan. If you deal with it incorrectly, then we could have a war. That's what President Xi said in front of his face. So I don't think Trump wants a war, and I think he's slowly backing out. And I think you can see from his language. Even Rubio is basically used to be a major China hawk. Now he's calmed down a lot. And even Rubio is saying it might be impossible for us to defend Taiwan. But China doesn't even have to attack the island of Taiwan. They can just do a blockade. Very similar to the blockade America is doing to Cuba. But the blockade that's going to be happening by China on Taiwan that's going to be a real blockade, guys. They're going to be absolutely surrounded by Chinese ships and drones and missiles and stuff. America will not go anywhere near the island of Taiwan. They won't be able to. Um, you know, Taiwan will lose its energy within a month. They will run out of oil. They will run out of food. They will have no choice but to just give up. And America won't be able to supply them with anything. They can't supply them with oil. They can't supply them with food. They can't supply them with missiles or any weapons. And if any ships come near the island, then China will just blow them up. It will be absolutely impossible, guys, to unblock that if China decides to do a blockade against the island of Taiwan. And China could go into the island and just kidnap the leadership, just like America did with Maduro. So that could be an option as well, with the Chinese SAS going into the island and kidnapping them in the middle of the night. There's not many places they can hide China has got surveillance satellites everywhere in Taiwan. They know exactly where people are. They know exactly what's happening. So yeah, I think Trump is the first US president who actually is using his common sense. Not even Biden used his common sense, because if you remember when Biden was president, he said, the reporters asked Biden, would America, you know, join in to defend the island if China wanted to reunify? And Biden said, "Yeah, we would interfere. We would join in a war with China." That's what Biden said 3 times or 4 times. He didn't say it once as a mistake. He said it like 3 times. So going back to semiconductors, you know, when Trump first placed his sanctions and tariffs against China, and he blocked China from accessing high-end EUV machines. He blocked many Chinese companies from getting high-end chips, for example. This was around 10 years ago when China didn't really have much of a semiconductor industry. Back then would have been a good idea for China to basically take over the island of Taiwan, because it would have been under you know, a security issue, a huge security issue for not being able to get access to high-end chips. But China didn't do that. They decided to build their own chip industry instead. It would have been easy to take over the island and take over all the fabs and things like that, of TSMC, nationalize them. But they decided to, go along a peaceful route. They decided to build their own semiconductor industry. And they allowed TSMC to build factories in Arizona and things like that. They don't care if TSMC moves to United States. They don't care about the chips at all. China cares about the island itself. They don't care that they make chips and stuff. That all can move to America as far as they're concerned. They just care about the people. They care about the island just reunifying with the rest of the mainland. This is the last jigsaw puzzle from the 100-year humiliation, and it's vitally important for the island to reunify with the mainland, because this is all part of the Chinese rejuvenation project, and this is this is they can finally close the chapter on the 100-year humiliation if this happens, if they can reunify. So it's more than just semiconductors. It's national pride, it's more about that. But China right now, they don't really need the chips from TSMC. If TSMC decided to ban all chip sales to China, all the high-end chip sales, China doesn't care. China makes At this stage, they are making 5 nanometers chips by SMIC. Huawei is making AI chips, and many other startup companies in China are making, DRAMs and many other type of chips. And China is fast catching up, guys. And it's not going to take another year or maybe two. China will have its own EUV machines. They already have their own DUV machine, which is going through testing. They will soon have their own EUV machine, and they'll be able to make their own high-end chips with those. And the Americans think that the only reason China wants the island is because of the chips. It's not the case at all. This is more about national pride, and they don't seem to understand that. And a lot of people in Taiwan actually want to reunify with China. And I'm talking about the people who are ethnically Chinese, by the way. Because Taiwan is actually, there's a lot of ethnicities in Taiwan. It has a lot of ex-Japanese in there, ex-Filipino, other Asians living in the island as well. Because if you look at the history of the island, it got taken over by Japan for a long time, and so you have a lot of pro-Japanese people living in Taiwan, and this is why a lot of them are basically part of the DPP party who want independence from mainland, and these are pro-Japanese people. So Taiwan actually, the leader of Taiwan came out on a statement today, and he says that Taiwan is independent from China. That was his words. He said Taiwan is independent from China. And obviously China didn't take it very, very well. So even though Trump has said to them, he said to the leadership in Taiwan, he said, do not push for separatism. That's what Trump said. And they ignored him. They basically said that Taiwan is independent from China. So I think that China should really, really push for reunification with the island sooner rather than later, guys. Because the longer they leave it, the worse it's going to get. Because with geopolitics, I mean, for example, you see what's happening with Ukraine and Russia, right? If Russia did nothing and NATO was allowed to have more bases in Ukraine, and then one day suddenly there's nuke on Ukrainian borders pointing at Russia. By then it'll be too late. You're not. It would have been too late to have a war with Ukraine, because you would have NATO nukes right on Ukrainian and Russian borders, ready to fire on Russian cities. So the fact that Russia can attack Ukraine now and get rid of that threat, because Russia is looking after their long-term security. Same way China should do the same. China needs to look at these threats that are coming in Asia. One of the threats is Japan, obviously, and they are obviously rearming themselves, and they're talking about having their own nukes as well. So China needs to stop that, not ignore it. They need to basically put a stop to that. Same way, they need to reunify with the island as well, sooner rather than later. I know a lot of people say time is on China's hand. No, time is not on China's hands, guys. The longer you leave it, each generation that is born in the island gets brainwashed to be anti-Chinese. Because I know a lot of Taiwanese people, guys. They come to UK, and I do talk to them. There's a lot of Taiwanese that come to UK, a lot of students and stuff. So I do talk to them. And a lot of them tell me the same thing. They get brainwashed to hate China from school, because their school education system is all about making China look like the bad guy, the enemy. and they push for, you know, they push for Taiwanese independence and Taiwanese culture, and they want to basically separate themselves completely from China. They completely get rid of the Chinese history and focus on Western history, and it's basically it was Western led, the education system in the island. So kids are growing up brainwashed. They don't have that same identity that their ancestors are from China and they're Chinese, and they don't think like that. They think they are separate, they are independent. And so each generation of kids growing up, they're going to be more and more further away from their Chinese heritage and their Chinese culture and their Chinese roots. And the more time it takes, the more time you're allowing Japan to get rearmed and maybe get nuclear weapons, and the more time you are giving America to basically put nukes on Taiwan even one day. You never know. I mean, I don't think Trump will do that, but you might have a future president who might come in and decide he wants to put nukes on Taiwan. So anything can happen. I think it's important for China to realize if they need to reunify with the island, they need to do it sooner rather than later. They cannot stay as they are. It has to happen sooner rather than later. So yeah, I'm not always hating on Trump. Sometimes he does speak the truth. Sometimes he speaks common sense. But, you know, other times I think he's a lunatic. Sometimes with people who have got a genius mind, sometimes they do act like lunatics, but sometimes they have moments of genius. Sometimes they have a very good common sense. Sometimes they have good, they speak well, but then they have a moment of madness, and you know, he all goes, he just goes crazy again. I think what people need to do with presidents of the United States, they need to just take away their access to social media. I think Trump has done so much damage just by using his social media, Truth Social. The amount of damage he's done, diplomacy is just out the window, guys. There's no more room for diplomacy. All it takes is one tweet from President Trump, and that's it. That's your diplomacy done there with one tweet. I'm going to destroy your civilization. That's his diplomacy. It doesn't matter who's standing in front of a diplomatic circle. One tweet with Trump just destroys it all. Anyway, guys, let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks again for joining and subscribing. Keep doing what you're doing, and let's hit 1,000 and move on from there. Take care, guys. Bye.